Everyone else at the parent-teacher conference was sitting together, mothers and fathers smiling politely, pretending the world made sense. I sat alone, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the floor. The chair beside me, where Melissa should have been, stayed empty. The teacher hesitated when she saw me, like she wasn't sure how honest she should be. Then she spoke. "Mr. Darrell, your daughter has been submitting some imaginative writing. She refers to a better dad, not you, a man in a black car, wearing a gold watch, who gives her everything she asks for. She says he doesn't fight with her mother, that he listens, that he cares." I stared at the stack of paper she handed me. In each story, the man had no name, but the details were vivid: the luxury, the strength, the calm voice, her dream father. "She says he visits her when she sleeps," the teacher added, lowering her voice. "She says he's not from this world." I didn't say anything. What could I say? I was right there in her life, every morning, every meal, every school pickup, but in her heart, I was a shadow, and the man she dreamed of, that was a version of me I buried years ago. That night, Melissa didn't come home again. She hadn't in 4 nights. Her name showed up on Jose's Instagram instead, tagged in rooftop dinners, new shoes, and pop-up events. Building her personal brand, she told me. What she was really building was distance. I peeked into my daughter's room. She was curled up, clutching her stuffed bear, the same one I'd bought her when Melissa forgot her birthday 3 years ago. I stood in the doorway for a long time, just watching. In the morning, I made breakfast and placed a heart-shaped waffle on her plate. "Darrell," she said quietly, "is it wrong that I want a new dad?" The syrup bottle stopped halfway. I set it down gently. "No," I replied, "it's not wrong to want something better." That evening, after he went to bed, I opened the closet. I hadn't touched those clothes in years, the tailored suits, the black trench coat, the old cufflinks. Then I opened the vault in the garage. The Rolls-Royce Phantom was still there, waiting, clean as ever. I turned on the lights. I made one call, just one. By noon the next day, Deborah stood outside my house in a gray blazer, holding a pink gift bag. She raised an eyebrow when she saw me in the old suit. "I didn't think I'd ever see this version of you again," she said. "You think I'm crazy?" I asked. "I think you're overdue." We waited on the front porch. The door creaked open. My daughter stepped out. Her eyes widened when she saw the car. "What is this?" she asked. I knelt beside her. "You wanted a new dad, didn't you?" She nodded slowly. "Well," I said, "he heard your wish." She stared at me, then in the car, then at Deborah. "You're the assistant?" she asked Deborah. Deborah smiled. "For today, yes." My daughter took the gift bag and peeked inside. There was a tiny tiara and a golden pen with her name on it. "This is from him?" she asked. I nodded. She ran to the car. I followed behind slowly, hands in my pockets. She opened the back door and gasped. The seat had her favorite stuffed animal waiting, the same one I'd had Deborah duplicate last night. I stood by the driver's side in dark sunglasses, watching her smile. She looked at me once, just once, and I knew, for the first time in months, her heart felt full. Melissa had erased me in her world. Jose had replaced me in her spotlight, but my daughter, she still had space for me, even if I had to return wearing a different skin, not to prove anything, not to win Melissa back, but because my daughter made a wish. And I was going to make it come true. The world only saw Darrell as the quiet one, the father who showed up alone, the man in worn-out jackets with creases under his eyes, the guy who packed bento boxes with cartoon toothpicks and remembered recital schedules no one else did. To neighbors, he was kind. To teachers, he was present, but to Melissa, he was forgettable, at best, disposable, on most days. Their marriage had not started in chaos, but in calculation. Melissa had dreams of owning something branded with her name. She spoke often about legacy, about appearance, about how nothing meant anything if it wasn't beautiful in pictures. Darrell, on the other hand, had always built in silence. Years before she ever took notice of him, Darrell had founded one of the earliest cloud security frameworks that IPO'd within 3 years. He sold it before the age of 30. Quietly, deliberately, no interviews, no headlines, just terms, signatures and an exit large enough to vanish from the public eye. When Melissa met him, she saw none of that. She saw a quiet tech consultant at a mutual friend's launch party who didn't brag, didn't interrupt, and didn't laugh too loudly. He complimented her dress once. She smiled. The rest moved quickly. They married fast, faster than anyone expected. Daryl didn't need glamour, but Melissa lived for it. She posted filtered photos from their engagement shoot and tagged brands that didn't sponsor her. Even in their wedding vows, she edited herself, changing tone mid-sentence, making sure every guest was watching. Daryl let her. Not because he was weak, but because at the time, he thought letting someone shine was love. Melissa never asked about his past. Not when he paid for the penthouse in full, not when her design business got seed funding with a single call he made, not when she spotted unread messages from old investors begging him to return to the boardroom. She didn't ask because she assumed there was nothing more to see than what stood quietly beside her. And Daryl never corrected her. He stayed home more than she did. Deborah, his longtime assistant turned operations manager, used to say it amused her, watching a man so capable pretend to be average. Deborah had been with Daryl since the early days. She helped write the exit contracts when he sold his first company. She knew the man behind the hoodies. She knew how he ran mental simulations while packing school lunches. She knew he never missed a deadline, even if he was writing code with a toddler asleep on his lap. When their daughter was born, everything shifted for Daryl. He fell in love the moment he saw her, tiny, loud, demanding. She clutched his finger like she already knew him. He named her, held her first, walked her to sleep, changed every diaper, sang lullabies off-key and often. He turned Sunday mornings into castles made of pancakes, nap times into reading rituals, and every skinned knee into a father-daughter bond no camera could capture. But the more Daryl leaned in, the more Melissa leaned out. Melissa didn't resent her daughter, not exactly, but she resented the way Daryl's quiet devotion pulled the attention away from her. She hated the way people praised his parenting in comments, hated the way the school principal smiled at him like he was the one holding the family together. She couldn't compete in silence, so she began posting louder. Rooftop shots, #events, stylized family photos where Daryl was always out of frame. She said she was building a personal brand. What she was building was a boundary. That's when Jose entered. He started as her content manager, then her driver, then her photographer, then her curated storyline. Jose understood optics. He knew how to keep Melissa trending, and when she needed someone to fill emotional gaps, Jose did it gladly. He wasn't cruel, he was strategic, and when Daryl noticed, because he always noticed, he said nothing, not yet, because his daughter still came first. Deborah told him once, "You can survive anything, Daryl, but don't let her grow up thinking this is what love looks like." He didn't answer, but he didn't forget it either. At school, parents whispered, teachers smiled too gently. "You're doing great," they'd say, "considering your situation." And Daryl would nod, quietly swallowing the way Melissa's absence was treated like his deficiency. His daughter noticed. She started drawing a man in suits, with a gold watch and polished shoes. She wrote short stories about him. She didn't call him Daddy, she called him something else. The other man. Daryl once asked her, "Why does he show up in all your stories?" "Because he listens," she whispered, "because he shows up." That night, Daryl sat on the balcony until the streetlights dimmed. At dawn, he sent Deborah a message. "Find the car, prep the name." She responded in under 5 minutes. By noon, the Rolls-Royce was pulled from storage. His old black trench coat was steamed. Deborah arrived with a bag, inside, cufflinks, dark shades, and a gift box with a gold ribbon. Melissa returned home just before dusk and found the car parked outside. Confused, she stepped onto the sidewalk and paused. Daryl stood beside the car, buttoning his coat, speaking to Deborah with quiet precision. Melissa hadn't seen Deborah in 2 years. She narrowed her eyes. "What is this?" she asked. Daryl turned slowly. "Just giving our daughter what she wished for." Before Melissa could speak, their daughter appeared at the door. "Way." She froze when she saw the car, her jaw slowly dropping. "You found him," she said, breathless. "The man from my stories." Daryl held the back door open. "He's been looking for you." The child ran down the steps. Melissa took 1 step forward but didn't move again. Deborah handed the girl the gift box. Inside was a small tiara, a velvet notebook, and a pen that sparkled in the sun. She gasped and turned to Daryl, not as her father, but as someone new. "Can we go?" she asked. Daryl nodded. Melissa stood frozen. From the living room window, Jose watched the exchange. He didn't come outside, not this time. Darryl buckled his daughter into the seat and slid into the driver's side. The engine purred to life. Deborah stepped back, watching them go. Melissa turned to her. "You knew he was going to do this," she said bitterly. Deborah replied, "No, I hoped he would." That night, Darryl took his daughter to a garden rooftop restaurant Melissa had never been invited to. They ate warm bread and lavender lemonade. They watched the lights of the city flicker like fireflies. His daughter rested her head on his shoulder. "Thank you," she said, "for finding him." Darryl looked at the skyline and whispered, "I never lost him. I just didn't think I'd need him again." He wasn't wrong. Melissa had asked once, years ago, why he kept the old car and never sold it. Darryl's answer then, "Some identities you don't erase, you just put them to sleep." Now, that identity was wide awake, and Melissa, once the star of every frame, wasn't even in the shot. Melissa paced the kitchen, tapping her nails against the marble island, her phone untouched on the counter. She had refreshed her feed 3 times but saw nothing. No pictures, no mentions, no hints of Darryl's sudden transformation, no tags from Deborah, no trace of that ghost in black who drove off with her daughter like he owned the world. And it gnawed at her. She'd spent years crafting an online presence that dictated what people saw, what they envied, what they believed about her family. If Darryl had stayed in the background like he was supposed to, she could have kept curating the illusion, but now, he'd broken formation. He wasn't invisible anymore, he wasn't irrelevant, he was captivating. And worse, their daughter looked genuinely happy with him. Jose entered, holding a steaming cup of almond latte, oblivious. "I booked the hotel for our Milan shoot," he said, sliding the mug onto the table, "and the campaign brief is finalized. Oh, and I scheduled a spa appointment for you tomorrow. Your under eyes looked kind of tired in the last reel." Melissa didn't respond. Jose tilted his head. "Something wrong?" She looked up slowly. "He didn't post anything." "Who?" "Darryl." Jose chuckled. "That's good, isn't it? We don't need him trying to trend." Melissa's fingers tightened. "No, you don't understand. He left in the rolls. Deborah was with him. Our daughter was dressed like a princess, and they disappeared." Jose raised an eyebrow. "And?" "He's making a move, not publicly, not like I would be, but quietly, strategically. That's worse." Jose blinked. "Are you scared of Darryl now?" "No," Melissa lied. "I'm annoyed." But she was scared, not of Darryl's presence, but of his potential. She had seen it only once before, years ago, in a silent conference room where men in suits looked at him like he was gold. She'd forgotten that version of him. She made herself forget. Melissa reached for her phone and opened their shared cloud storage. The last auto backup was from a week ago. Photos of their daughter, drawings, a video of Darryl making breakfast. She scrolled until she reached an unfamiliar file. It was a scanned contract. It had Deborah's watermark. A blind trust account. Labeled under their daughter's name. She opened it. Every clause was surgical, tight, legal proof. Jose leaned over. "What's that?" "A future without me," she muttered. Later that night, Darryl stood alone in the apartment he'd rented downtown, quiet, minimal, full of clean corners and natural light. His daughter was asleep in the next room, wrapped in the new blanket Deborah had picked out. He stared at the framed sketch she made that day, him in his coat, standing next to the car, holding her hand. He hadn't smiled like that in years. Deborah entered the room quietly. "She settled in?" "Out like a light," he replied. "I read her 2 chapters of that Elsa book you sent. She made me use character voices." "She likes the new place?" "She said it smells like peace." Deborah smiled faintly. "And you?" Darryl exhaled. "It's the first time I've felt like I could breathe." But peace came with questions. "Do you think she'll come after us?" he asked. Deborah's expression sobered. "Melissa doesn't care about parenting. She cares about losing. She's going to make this ugly, isn't she?" "She won't touch you directly," Deborah said, "but she might attack your credibility, maybe call you controlling, maybe spin the narrative. She's good at shaping sympathy." "She's already shaped a story I didn't consent to." Darryl pulled a drawer open. Inside were court papers, custody drafts. He hadn't filed them yet. He wanted to talk to Melissa first, but now? Deborah glanced at the files. "Do you want me to connect you with that international family lawyer we discussed?" I'll decide after the weekend, he said. Let her show her cards first. Meanwhile, Melissa wasn't sleeping. She posted a story of her and Jose on a rooftop with champagne. Caption: Healing with gratitude, just me and the ones who matter. It got over 40,000 views, but not from Daryl. She checked twice. The next morning, Melissa stormed into her agency's PR office. I need a cleanup strategy, image repositioning, something that gently reinforces I'm a hands-on mom without making me seem desperate. The assistant hesitated. The last 3 posts have been couple-focused. You haven't shown your daughter in months. Exactly, Melissa snapped. Now I need to. Back at Daryl's apartment, the mood was different. Their daughter was dancing in socks on the marble floor, holding a wooden spoon like a microphone. Daryl watched her from the kitchen, flipping pancakes. You seem lighter, Deborah said as she sipped her tea. She's laughing again, Daryl whispered. That's worth everything. But the light didn't last. 2 days later, Melissa filed an emergency petition. Publicly, it looked like she was fighting to protect her daughter from a controlling father. The filing claimed Daryl removed the child from her primary residence without warning and was exerting psychological control. By evening, news outlets had picked it up. A few influencer gossip accounts posted vague headlines. Fashion mogul Melissa Liu's ex-husband takes daughter without notice? Daryl read the report in silence. Deborah lowered her phone. She's trying to bait you. She's winning, he murmured. Not really, she's making noise. You're still holding the truth. Later that night, Melissa held a live Q&A. She wore a soft sweater, dim lighting, natural tones. I won't speak ill of my daughter's father, she said to the camera, but I do think kids deserve both parents, especially when one is trying to erase the other. Thousands commented, support poured in. Daryl closed his laptop. He didn't post anything, but he emailed his lawyer. Then he walked to his daughter's room and kissed her forehead. She's rewriting the script again, he whispered, but not this time. Deborah watched him. You're going to take it public? Not with noise, Daryl said, with proof. Meanwhile, Jose paced the living room while Melissa studied analytics. Are you really prepared to fight him on this? He asked. I have no choice. You're going to lose. Melissa froze. What? Jose shrugged. He's not the same guy you walked over. He's sharper now, clearer, focused. Melissa stood up. Are you taking his side? Jose scoffed. I'm not on anyone's side. I just don't want to go down with you. Melissa's eyes narrowed. Then leave. Jose didn't answer. The next day, a delivery arrived at Melissa's door, a small white box. Inside was a copy of the custody agreement Daryl had finalized, with one line highlighted in yellow. Any parent who leverages media platforms to distort co-parenting terms will forfeit temporary custody. Attached was a post-it. Your daughter isn't a brand. Daryl. Melissa crumpled the note, but her hands were shaking. That evening, Daryl stepped out onto the balcony with a mug of coffee, letting the cold air touch his skin. His mind wasn't on the custody papers anymore, it was on the cost. What it had taken to get here, the silence he had endured, the years he gave away so Melissa could live like a solo star. Behind him, Deborah opened the sliding door. She held a folded printout in her hand. Melissa's PR team just leaked old footage, she said. A staged video from 3 years ago. You are carrying your daughter out of the hospital. She's re-editing it to make it look like she wasn't there because you pushed her away. Daryl didn't flinch. Let her. You're not even going to respond? She thinks this is a brand war. It's not, it's custody. Deborah paused. And if she tries to get Jose to testify? Then we remind Jose he drove Melissa to every nightclub while our daughter cried herself to sleep. Daryl took a slow sip. The truth doesn't need volume, just timing. Meanwhile, Melissa locked herself in her walk-in closet, reviewing her next post. It was a carousel of her daughter's childhood photos, most of which Daryl had taken. She hesitated. For a moment, guilt crept in, not for what she'd done to Daryl, but for what she'd ignored in her daughter. She exited the app without posting. For the first time in years, she realized something horrifying. She didn't know what her daughter's favorite bedtime story was anymore. And Daryl did. Daryl woke before dawn. The apartment was still, dim, the early morning fog creeping along the windows. He didn't move for a long time, just lay there, staring at the ceiling, his arm resting across his forehead. Sleep had become fragmented, shallow. Dreams came in pieces, memories that weren't memories anymore. The last time his daughter held his hand without fear. The first time Melissa looked at him like he was in her way. He slipped out of bed and walked barefoot to the living room. The silence was too complete. He opened the balcony door and let the cold air in. That helped. It always did. He made coffee without turning on the lights. When Deborah arrived an hour later, the smell had already filled the space. "You slept?" she asked. "Enough," Daryl lied. She didn't push, she never did. They sat together in silence until the coffee cooled. Daryl finally spoke. "It's not a lawsuit, it's betrayal." Deborah glanced sideways. "What part?" She knew what was happening, knew how our daughter was shrinking, and she used it to stir up sympathy. She didn't fix it, she filmed it. Deborah set down her mug. "She thinks parenting is performance." "I know." He looked out at the skyline. "I just didn't think she'd go this far." Down the hall, a soft thud echoed, tiny feet tumbling out of bed. His daughter wandered into the room, blanket in hand, hair messy, voice small. "Daddy?" He turned. "I'm here." She crawled onto the couch and leaned against his arm, eyes half closed. He pulled her close. "She had a bad dream," Deborah whispered. "I know," Daryl said. His daughter mumbled into his chest. "The lady in heels yelled at me." He stiffened. "Melissa." He tucked the blanket around her. "She can't hurt you here." But it wasn't true, not completely. She could hurt from anywhere, on screens, in courts, through words spoken by others who didn't know the full story. Daryl stared straight ahead, numb. Meanwhile, Melissa sat cross-legged in her vanity chair, surrounded by soft gold lighting, rehearsing what to say on her next live show. Every sentence felt hollow, every draft felt forced. Nothing she wrote sounded real because nothing she felt was honest. She opened her phone again. Checked Daryl's profile. Still nothing, no photos, no statements, no retaliation. The silence unsettled her more than rage ever could. In the mirror, she barely recognized herself. Her makeup was perfect, her curls intact. But her eyes? They looked like glass. No sleep, no softness. Just calculation and regret fighting for space. She thought about Jose. About how distant he'd been the last few days. He didn't ask about the custody filing, didn't check if she was okay. He just moved around the apartment like a tenant, not a partner. Maybe he was waiting to see how badly she'd fall. She stood up, grabbed her coat, and walked out the door without saying anything. At the office, she asked her lawyer, "Can we retract the emergency motion?" The lawyer looked stunned. "You want to drop it?" "I want to stop this from turning into war." "Melissa," he said carefully, "that filing is already public. You can't undo perception." She stood quietly. Then let it fade. He leaned back. "You've made him the underdog." "I didn't mean to." "Doesn't matter." She left the office without speaking again. Meanwhile, Daryl was watching his daughter paint a birdhouse in the sunlight, her fingers smudged with blue and yellow, her tongue peeking from the side of her mouth in concentration. She looked like her old self again. He whispered, "I almost forgot what this looked like." Deborah leaned against the doorway. "That's because you never saw her without the pressure before." He nodded. "Do you think it'll last?" "Only if Melissa lets go." That evening, Daryl stood at the sink washing paint off his daughter's arms. She giggled as the cold water touched her skin. "You're better than the art teacher," she told him. "I used to be one in a different life." "You were everything in a different life," Deborah added from behind. He glanced at her. "Sometimes I wish I'd never left that life." "You didn't leave it. You paused it, for her." He dried his daughter's hands. "I don't know if she sees that." "She will, eventually." Just as the light began to dim, Daryl's phone buzzed. An unknown number. He answered anyway. It was Melissa. "Can we talk?" His first instinct was to hang up, but he didn't. "What do you want?" "I want to stop fighting." He didn't reply. "I went too far," she admitted. I tried to control the story, and I lost control of reality. Still, he didn't say anything. I want to see her, Melissa whispered. He looked at his daughter. She was dancing in the next room. I'll ask her, he said finally. Melissa exhaled, shaky. Thank you. Daryl hung up. He turned to Deborah. What now? You let her daughter decide. He nodded. He crouched down. Sweetheart, Mommy wants to visit. His daughter stopped dancing. Just visit? Yes, only if you want to. She thought hard, then nodded. Only if you stay too. I'll be right there. In that moment, Daryl felt everything. Anger, relief, sadness. A dull ache in his chest that didn't fade. He knew this wasn't peace, it was a pause, but even a pause was something. Later that night, Daryl sat alone on the floor of the living room, his back against the couch. The television played quietly in the back. Playground, a cartoon marathon that his daughter had left on before bedtime. He didn't turn it off. The sound of laughter, even artificial, made the apartment feel less hollow. He opened his laptop and pulled up a blank document. The cursor blinked at him. The custody agreement was ready to be submitted, but a part of him still hesitated. Not because he doubted what Melissa had done, but because filing it meant this story had no graceful ending. It meant scorched earth. It meant his daughter growing up in paperwork. Deborah entered with a blanket. You're cold, she said softly. I'm fine. She placed it over his shoulders anyway. She's been sleeping through the night, you notice that? Yes, he said. I notice everything now. You always did. He looked up at her. Do you think I'm doing the right thing? I think you're doing the necessary thing. But what if she remembers this war more than the peace? Deborah paused. Then make sure she remembers who protected her through it. Across town, Melissa sat in her car outside the school her daughter no longer attended. The parking lot was dark, but the front entrance light stayed on. She used to bring her here with rushed hair, lipstick still fresh, barely present. Today, she came alone. She clutched the tiny bracelet she found under the couch last week, something her daughter used to wear daily. She hadn't even realized it was missing until now. And it hit her all at once. She didn't even know what her daughter's voice sounded like when she was tired, or happy, or just quiet. Her reflection in the car window looked more like a stranger than ever. She'd built herself into an icon, a brand, but somewhere along the way, she'd stopped being a mother, not legally, but emotionally. Her phone buzzed. A message from Jose. Photo teams waiting on next weekend's shoot confirmations. She turned off the screen. Inside Daryl's apartment, his daughter stirred. I want to give Mommy a drawing, she mumbled in her sleep. He leaned in gently. What should it be? A butterfly, she said. So she remembers I'm not small anymore. Daryl's heart broke a little at that. Because she was right. She wasn't small anymore, and neither was this moment. Daryl stood at the edge of the park, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the sea of children swarming around colorful booths and food carts. His daughter was among them, cheeks painted like a tiger, her laughter blending with the spring air. It was the school's family picnic day, and Daryl had hesitated about coming, but she wanted to go, and he couldn't deny her something so simple anymore. She's really smiling again, Deborah said beside him, watching the child dash between paint stations and cotton candy carts. For now, Daryl replied, his tone cautious. She's rebuilding. He gave a short nod, and I'm trying to make sure no one tears her down again. The park buzzed with the chatter of other families, camera phones clicking as parents captured the moment. Daryl kept his distance, letting her breathe mattered more than hovering. A black SUV pulled up on the road beside the event. Daryl noticed it immediately. His jaw set, the door opened, and Melissa stepped out. She was dressed in a cream blouse, high-waisted slacks and designer flats. Sunglasses masked her expression, but her body language spoke volumes, nervous tension hidden beneath posture. She wasn't walking like an influencer today, she was walking like someone unsure if she had the right to be here. Did you invite her? Deborah asked. No, Daryl said. I haven't spoken to her since she called about that butterfly drawing. Deborah straightened. She didn't come alone. From the other side of the car, Jose emerged, camera in hand, zoom lens already attached. Daryl's hands curled into fists. Melissa started toward the field, scanning the crowd until her eyes locked onto her daughter near the crafts tent. She slowed her pace. For a moment, her facade slipped, her mouth parted slightly, her walk faltered. It was the first time in a long while she'd seen her daughter without the filter of social media. The little girl noticed her mother too. Her tiger-painted face froze. She didn't run, she didn't wave, she simply stared. Melissa dropped to one knee, arms open, silently inviting her over. But then Jose raised his camera and snapped. Click, click, click. The sound cut through Daryl's skull like a knife. He stepped forward immediately. Put the camera down, he growled. Jose didn't even flinch. It's public property, Daryl. You're photographing my daughter. I'm photographing a moment. This is a mother reconnecting with her child. People eat this stuff up. She's not your content. Jose's smirk was smug. She's Melissa's child. Melissa's trying. What are you afraid of? That people might like her again? Daryl moved closer, his voice dropping. I don't care who people like. I care who scars my kid. Jose stepped back, raising the camera again. Before he could snap another frame, smack. The camera flew sideways. Deborah stood in front of him now, her hand still extended from the strike. You don't get to archive trauma, she said coldly. Melissa stood stunned. Jose stumbled, fumbled with the camera, and looked around. Parents had started filming. Some whispered, others pointed. A security guard approached from the snack tent. What's going on here? Daryl didn't need to speak. One look at Jose's camera, and the scene told itself. Jose tried to backpedal. I'm her publicist. This is a miscommunication. She's not working, Deborah snapped. She's being a mother, which you turned into a photo shoot. The guard narrowed his eyes. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Melissa stepped forward. He's not with me. Not anymore. Jose froze. Excuse me? You heard me. She turned toward the guard. He has no permission to photograph my child. Jose stared at her, stunned. Melissa faced Daryl now. I didn't know he'd follow. I told him I was coming here alone. Daryl looked at her for a long moment. But you still let him think he could frame this. He walked away before she could answer. Later that day, a video went viral, Jose getting escorted out, his camera dangling, Melissa looking like a deer in headlights, Daryl shielding his daughter. The headline read, Fashion mogul's partner ejected from family event after filming child without consent. But the comments told a different story. This guy is a creep. Why is Melissa always surrounded by these types? Daryl's the only one acting like a parent. That night, sponsorship deals began pulling out of Melissa's upcoming launch. Jose attempted to go live, accusing Daryl of being possessive, controlling, but the narrative didn't stick. Screenshots surfaced of old texts, photo shoots, and clips showing Jose exploiting Melissa's family for attention. Melissa sat alone in her high-rise, blinds closed, laptop open to an empty email inbox. Her PR team hadn't responded. Her assistant sent a vague resignation email. She was left with silence. She stared at herself in the mirror. For once, she didn't see a victim. She saw a problem. The next morning, she showed up at Daryl's apartment. No makeup, simple sweater, hair in a bun. Daryl opened the door with a guarded stare. I let him go, she said. Jose, he's out. And I know that doesn't fix anything. Daryl stepped aside. She walked in and sat quietly in the living room. Deborah was there, going through a schedule on her tablet, but she didn't interrupt. Melissa looked up. I lost my credibility, I know that. Daryl stayed silent. I just want to get to know my daughter again, without a camera, without a caption. His expression didn't soften, but he didn't push her away either. Their daughter peeked from the hallway. Melissa knelt. Hey, baby. The girl blinked. Are you being real? Melissa exhaled. I think so. The child walked forward, slowly. She held out a folded napkin. On it was a shaky drawing, another butterfly. This one's stronger, she whispered. Melissa took it like it was fragile. She held her daughter close, and for once, no one was watching. No one but Daryl. And he wasn't watching to judge. He was watching to protect. Deborah gave him a slight nod. Later that night, Daryl sat in the dark again. But this time, the silence wasn't empty. It felt like a beginning. A dangerous one. But maybe, just maybe, it was no longer war. It was reckoning. The courtroom air was stale, like the kind that wrapped around unspoken truths and stretched silences. Darryl sat at the plaintiff's table, one hand gripping the edge of the desk so tightly that his knuckles were white. His charcoal suit looked crisp, but his eyes betrayed the war behind them. Months of back and forth, paperwork, mediation failures, character smears, all led to this moment. Directly across from him sat Melissa. She wore no makeup today. Her designer wardrobe had been replaced with a simple cream blouse and black skirt. She looked smaller without the layers of status. Her hair was pinned back, exposing eyes that were no longer used to being seen unfiltered. She refused to look at Darryl, but not out of defiance. It was a shame. Behind Darryl sat Deborah, silent but solid, like the spine of a book that refused to collapse. She had been his anchor through everything, running logistics, coordinating statements, organizing the appointments, and gently checking on him without demanding anything in return. The bailiff called the session to order as the judge entered. All rose, all sat, and then it began. The legal formalities took over first. Darryl's attorney laid out a calm, surgical narrative. Darryl's full-time parental presence, his clean record, his consistent scheduling, his medical attention, his emotional availability, school attendance reports, psychiatric evaluations for the child, witness statements, digital evidence, receipts for everything. Then came Melissa's turn. Her lawyer tried to walk a tightrope. Yes, my client's career demanded public presence. Yes, there were incidents of oversharing. Yes, her former publicist, Jose, overstepped and has since been dismissed. But what is parenting, Your Honor, if not the willingness to course correct? Darryl didn't blink, but inside, he felt the weight of how many times he had offered Melissa the chance to course correct. She had always chosen the lens. The judge listened, nodding politely, and then turned to Melissa. Ms. Melissa, the court would like to hear directly from you. Please speak. She stood, slowly, like every movement cost her pride. I was wrong, Melissa began, her voice fragile but not fake. Not in a scandalous tabloid way. In a very real, very human way. I mistook visibility for value. I believed being adored by millions would somehow earn me the right to call myself a good mother. She looked at the judge, then at Darryl. But Darryl never had followers, he just had a presence. While I posted filtered birthday photos, he cleaned the cake off our daughter's fingers. When she got the flu and couldn't sleep, he stayed up with her till dawn. He missed meetings for her. I missed her for meetings. Her throat caught. I didn't deserve him, and sometimes I wonder if I even deserve her. But I'm here because I want to try to be someone she doesn't unlearn. A quiet settled over the room. Then Darryl's lawyer asked to present one final piece of evidence, a video. It was filmed 2 nights ago. The judge agreed. The lights dimmed slightly, the screen lit up. It was Darryl and his daughter, sitting on the floor in pajamas. She held a small stuffed rabbit in her lap. Sweetie, Darryl said on the video, what do you want the judge to know? The girl hesitated, then whispered, I want Daddy to keep reading me bedtime stories. And what about Mommy? I don't like when she brings phones. What if she doesn't? The girl paused. Then, maybe she can come. Melissa's face folded in on itself. She looked down, breathing through her trembling mouth. The video ended, the judge straightened, and gave her ruling. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to Mr. Darryl. Supervised visitation is granted to Ms. Melissa, with weekly sessions. However, there will be no digital recording devices allowed during those visits. Additionally, the court orders that Ms. Melissa attend family therapy and parenting education for 6 months. The case will be reviewed again at that time. Melissa didn't object. She didn't even flinch. She nodded slowly, as though she had already known the answer before the question was ever asked. Outside the courthouse, a group of reporters buzzed like flies. Cameras flashed, mics extended. But Darryl exited through the private staff hallway, holding his daughter's hand. No statements, no victory lap, just peace. They sat quietly in the back seat of the car as it pulled out of the underground garage. Darryl looked down. She was watching her own reflection in the car window. Is Mommy leaving forever? She asked. No, he said softly. She's learning how to come. Back the right way. The child leaned her head on his shoulder. I hope she learns fast. Melissa returned to her condo, but the silence was brutal. Jose had leaked more old photos, some of them from moments she hadn't even remembered being captured. The public had turned on her again. Not out of cruelty, but fatigue. They were tired of curated redemption arcs. They wanted real. Melissa sat on the floor of her walk-in closet. Around her were rows of shoes and handbags, symbols of applause that no longer clapped. In her lap was a photo, one that Deborah had taken. It was of Daryl and their daughter baking together, faces covered in flour, laughter frozen in time. Melissa hadn't been there. She had posted a skincare reel that day. For the first time in years, she didn't cry over her falling followers. She cried over the missed frosting on her daughter's cheek. Meanwhile, at Daryl's apartment, Deborah was setting out dishes for dinner. Daryl was rinsing rice in the kitchen sink. Their daughter played quietly with building blocks on the floor. It was an unremarkable evening, but that was what made it sacred. After dinner, after the dishes, after stories and goodnight kisses, Daryl walked out onto the balcony with a warm mug in hand. The city lights shimmered in the distance, but for the first time, he wasn't drawn to the skyline. He was drawn to the stillness. Deborah joined him moments later, a cardigan wrapped around her arms. "You did it," she said. He looked at her. "Did I?" She nodded. "You didn't just protect her, you protected yourself from becoming bitter." Daryl exhaled. "I wanted to destroy Melissa at one point. And yet, when she was finally honest, you didn't." "I didn't because of her," he said, tilting his head toward the child's bedroom. "That girl doesn't need a hero with a scorched earth, she just needs consistency." Deborah leaned on the railing. "What happens now?" "We build something quieter." A silence passed, then he added, "She's not the only one who wants someone to show up, I do too." Deborah didn't speak, she just reached over, wrapped her fingers around his, and held tight. And for the first time in a long time, Daryl allowed himself to feel what he'd buried. Hope. 3 months after the final court ruling, the world began to forget Melissa's name. The headlines faded, the hashtags slowed. Her fan pages went quiet, overtaken by new controversies, younger stars, newer faces. She was no longer trending. But Daryl hadn't forgotten. Because revenge, real revenge, isn't loud. It's methodical, precise, invisible until the very last moment. At exactly 6:45 a.m., a discreet black van pulled up outside Jose's studio office. The staff had barely arrived when several screens across the facility went black, then rebooted into a frozen screen, his own face, edited into a training montage titled, "The Manipulator Behind the Curtain," a documentary by Solstice Media. At the same time, influencer accounts tied to his management firm began receiving email links. Privately recorded voice clips, video edits, and time-stamped receipts of Jose coaching child actors, staging family moments, and falsifying emotional breakdowns, all meticulously backed up, all legally untraceable. It was a coordinated strike. The public outcry was immediate. Child rights advocates demanded investigations. Multiple parents who had once been silenced by NDA-heavy contracts began to speak up. A full-blown class action lawsuit formed. Streaming services started removing shows he had produced. His sponsors pulled out. His office was abandoned by the week's end. He tried to hold a live stream to explain, to defend, but 30 seconds in, the feed froze. Unknown to him, the very platform hosting that stream had changed hands 2 months ago. Solstice Media now owned 37% of the platform's shares, thanks to a silent acquisition headed by Daryl. Every tool Jose had once used to amplify himself was now under Daryl's command. Melissa found out the same way the rest of the world did, by watching it unfold. At first, she assumed it was a coincidence. But when she received a package delivered to her condo, the same one Jose had stayed in, it all became clear. Inside were printouts of messages between Jose and reporters. Unpublished photos from her home, proof he'd been using her as leverage for months, plotting his rise on her back. And on top of the files, sat a short handwritten note. "You wanted your story to matter, so I made it matter, but this time, the truth got the views." Daryl. Melissa sat with it for hours. She didn't cry, she didn't get angry. She simply said, "I deserved that," aloud to no one. Because she did. Meanwhile, Daryl continued working quietly behind the scenes. Solstice Media wasn't just a revenge tool, it became a beacon for ethical content. He launched a platform where children exploited by content creation families could anonymously share their stories, with legal support, mental health services, and most importantly, freedom from being filmed. Deborah helped build the structure. She became head of outreach, training staff on trauma-informed communication. She never asked for credit. She never posted once about her work, but every line of the company's values bore her voice. And at home, Daryl was finally breathing. His daughter had started therapy sessions, not because of a diagnosis, but because Daryl wanted her to have someone who listened that wasn't him. She responded well, she laughed more, slept better. And one day, while painting, she said, "Daddy, can I make something that no one ever sees?" Daryl smiled. "Yes, that's how you know it's yours." Melissa continued visiting weekly. Quietly, without expectation. At first, her daughter was stiff, untrusting. Melissa accepted it. She didn't bring gifts, didn't try to win her back with sparkle. She just listened, played games, asked questions. And when she got a goodbye hug one day, small, half-hearted, but real, Melissa went home and sat in silence for an hour. That night, she picked up a paintbrush for the first time in years, not to post, not to share, just to remember who she had been before the screen took over. She painted a butterfly with mismatched wings, no symmetry, no filters, just feeling. And it was the best thing she'd done in years. Weeks later, she messaged Daryl. "Melissa, was it all you? The leak, the media, the fall?" Daryl: "No. Jose did that to himself. I just gave people permission to see it." She didn't reply, but she didn't delete the message either. Months passed. One fall afternoon, Melissa requested a meeting. Not at court, not at a content cafe, just a neutral park bench. Daryl agreed. She arrived in jeans and a hoodie, no team, no stylist, just her. "I came to say something," she said. "Go ahead," he said calmly. "I hate that you had to clean up a mess I made, that you carried the emotional labor while I carried the image, that she called you her hero while I was still trying to be a hashtag." Daryl didn't speak, he let her say everything. "I see it now, not just what I did, but I gave up. She was never an accessory, she was supposed to be my anchor." He exhaled. "Ed slowly. Then be her anchor now." Melissa blinked. "You're not angry?" "Oh, I was," he said, eyes steady. "But anger is loud. I needed something stronger." "Which was?" "Peace." Melissa didn't cry. She nodded. And then said, "Thank you for protecting her. From me." Daryl stood up. "You were lost. I didn't stop you. I just made sure she didn't follow." They parted ways that day with no drama. No forced forgiveness. Just understanding. Later that evening, Daryl returned home to the smell of burnt cookies. Deborah stood in the kitchen, laughing with his daughter as they tried to scrape off the edges. He didn't say a word, he just stepped in and joined them. They sat on the floor, eating the least burnt ones and laughing at their failure. No cameras, no story, just life. Later that night, Daryl reviewed the final cut of Solstice Media's biggest release yet, a documentary series exposing the hidden damages of child influencer culture. It ended not with data or a shocking reveal, it ended with his daughter's voice. "Sometimes I don't remember if something happened, or if we just filmed it." That line went viral, not because it was catchy, but because it was true. It triggered a wave of national policy changes. Judges began rethinking custody laws for online families. Schools introduced media ethics into curriculum. And Daryl? He finally slept through the night. Meanwhile, Melissa's social account stayed silent. For the first time in years, she had nothing to sell, and it felt good. She started painting again, teaching art at a local community center under a different name. The kids didn't know her past, only her presence. One afternoon, her daughter dropped by during a session. She didn't announce herself, she just sat quietly in the corner and began drawing. Melissa didn't approach, but when the girl left, she handed her a folded paper. Inside was a butterfly. It had Melissa's name written underneath. Not Mommy, just Melissa. And it was enough. Back at home, Daryl stood with Deborah on the balcony, looking out at a world that had once broken him and now, somehow, bowed to him, quietly, respectfully. "I'm proud of you," she said. "I'm more proud of you," he replied. His phone buzzed, a news alert. Solstice Media documentary sparks national reform, new bill limits child content monetization. Daryl turned it off, then tossed his phone on the couch. Let's not miss the sunset. They stood together, arms barely touching, watching the sky bleed soft peach and lavender. And in that silence, Daryl realized something. He never needed to become a new man. He just needed the world to stop confusing the loudest man in the room for the strongest, and he had. One story at a time.